Hi everyone. Today we have a special guest. Every guest is a special. Eduardo Garcia, a researcher at the Technological Center in Biodiversity, Ecology and Environment and Food Technology, or for short, Data Technological Center. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me for this talk.
Can you introduce to the wide audience yourself?
Yes. Well, I am a geographer. I did my graduation, my master's, and now my thesis in geography. And I'm also a land surveyor, a technician, land surveyor. And I work as a senior technician at Beta Tech, studying, researching on agricultural practices, remote sensing, agroecology, and many things.
Yeah. Actually, as a young and passionate researcher, because I usually interview different scientists in their beginning career, mid career, or end of their career, and it's nice to have you actually as a young and very passionate researcher in geography, environmental science, and scientific investigation. So what do you think of the current development in technology and its impact on environmental sciences, high resolution remote or ground sensors, big data, AI, and so on?
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting question, because working with geotechnologists, you're very in touch with that. So, for instance, it's impossible to follow up with all the technology that's being available. It's developing. It's too much information. But working with science, being on the fringe of science, you start to get in touch with the new advancements of any technology. Being like, for example, 15 years ago, LiDAR, 20 years ago, LiDAR was like a big thing, and now we're using it every day. We have a national flight plans for each nation here in Europe to map the biomass, for example. So, from my perspective, this type of let me say, like, revolution, technological revolution, is positive once it is used wisely for developing science, for developing like future research, for expanding the limits of what we can research. Also, um, when you research in areas like remote sensing, for example, AI, as I mentioned, um, there is always criticism on it, and it's healthy, and we need that. We need to be skeptical. We don't want to think that science is a solve-all tool, or that technology will solve everything. There are some problems that it's beyond our knowledge yet, and we're expanding that knowledge. So what I think is that we need to be skeptical, but we shouldn't be afraid to use it, since it is used ethically, of course. Since if it's used uh, in a way that's also verifiable. Speaking science-wise, it needs to be verifiable. At least I need to know what it's doing. Whatever, if you use AI or large language models, that now it's the trend. And I think that's the most important now for science, is to keep up the reproducibility, being able to verify sources, verify the content. So, I think that's the question, right?
Yeah, I think that's also very essential point. I guess that's not usually celebrated or promoted per se, the reproducibility.
Yes.
Certain practices or certain new techniques that has been developed. I mean, it's sad. It's not even in environmental science. It's in general in science. That's something that is being not being paid attention to. But yeah.
Yeah, and also, like, that's also an issue with paid articles. When you need to pay to read it, that's already a barrier. and we don't need to go even further. Like just that's also a limitation for reproducibility. So in the end, science develops where it's possible to verify, reproduce, and also that's what makes science science. It's possible to be verified by third parties.
Yeah. So apart from this, also now we are in the age of new technologies, a breakthrough AI. So as we peer into the next decade of environmental research, what direction do you see gaining dominance, and which innovations or instruments do you think will be essential to driving progress?
Yes. It's that's a very interesting question, because for at least for my area of research, that's more remote sensing sciences, or geotechnology science in general. What I see is that for future research, I believe we already have enough data, enough methodologies. We need just to know how to fit them together to produce. Of course, we need to breakthrough, like basic science. For example, if we develop a new type of sensor, like we did with LiDAR, if we develop a new type of technology that could be used, for example, um, there was, I don't recall now by my mind, but I remember there was an article that was published. They found a vault inside the pyramids using neutrinos, a sensor of neutrinos. So if we can break through just creating new sensors, it's good. But I believe we already have enough technology. We are not following up. We are publishing thousands of articles every year, and it's difficult to keep up. So I think now maybe it should be more used to manage the knowledge that we have and what we can apply it. It will be like everything that can happen. It can help to model the data. So I have this perception that we are trying to model the world now. We're trying to model the complexity of the world. Like that being said, as I mentioned, when I graduated in geography and my master's in geography, we have a heavy influence on general systems theory. It was from Bertalanffy. He was a soil scientist in the Soviet Union, and he developed this type of research that's not Cartesian, about isolating an object out of context, but rather seeing that object as a system, as belonging to a system. So, for example, if I'm going to analyze, for example, carbon, I'm not going to take only the carbon out of the soil, analyze it by itself. I will analyze it by the system that is in it. So I will analyze the carbon in relation to nitrogen, to microbial activity, to decomposition, to nitrogen, to texture, to granulometry. So I will analyze in relation to that. And that's like one of the big problems also in soil sciences, because you will find plenty of articles that they reproduce certain aspects of soil parameters, or I don't know, so soil improvements, or other things, and isolated in the lab. But once it's in the system, in the landscape, in the real world, it behaves differently. So I believe that now the science is moving a little bit to that end, to look in the thing in more holistic way, because it's good to specialize and to keep up in a branch and going specializing every time to a new branch, but it's also good to have a holistic approach, knowing how things connect between them.
I guess in this sense, because modeling, that's also one thing that is becoming, yes, essential. And at a certain time, we are living in an age of AI, and with direct influence of AI in science. So what are your views on AI in science? Is it a friend, or is it a foe, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that every time we have a technological improvement, everyone thinks it's the doom, it's the end of the world. I have lots of concerns with AI, and I think we should have lots of concerns with AI. And from my point of view, as a scientific view, I don't see any problem with large language models. As I said, if you can reproduce, if you can verify, and if you can research on it. For example, there are now plenty of articles that are being published on uh, learning new chemical compositions. Thousands compositions that are being able to 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 create using large language models. Also, large language models, they are very good at segmenting images for remote sensing. So we call it deep learning or machine learning, and they are very good to do that. So we should use it. The analogy that I do is that you shouldn't use large language models, for example, because I know some scientists that they are very strict on that. It's not, you should not use it. And I say, okay, so you shouldn't use like the corrector, the automatic corrector of your document that you use on the. Maybe we should go back to the typewriter then and write it down. So I don't think the problem is technology. Large language models are a tool that should be used. The problem is when it is appropriated in a way to become marketable and profit is above everything. And once you put that, is as one time Dr. Harari from Homo God, and I think it was in that book Homo God, that he wrote that if we could use this type of technology for self-improvement, for if I have an AI that tells me, that senses that I have a disturbance in the circulatory system, or if it see that I'm in a bad mood and it suggests me some music to help me, or it starts to see a trend that I'm not sleeping well and try to, then I see it's good. We should incentivize that. But if we use it as a just control people, or to suggest, or to incline people to a different opinion, or to direct certain aspects, then I don't think it should be used.
Yeah, I completely agree, because in daily life, I usually, of course, try to remain my own opinion within me, because I don't want to lose my friends and colleagues. But I'm extremely skeptical of AI in whatever field it's being used, because I will also share on the screen a new article from Scientific American, basically. But of course, the authors are from sociology or philosophy department, I guess, that AI is bullshitting. Anyhow, for me, I completely agree that we need to use it as an assistant, because it makes a lot of errors which we may not notice. It simulates a nice reply. It's very good at providing convincing replies, but nevertheless, we should remain very skeptical, strict, but use it as our assistant, as you said, like recommending us a nice movie, which I usually use. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that it is a good tool. And the problem, and that's one thing that there is also one thing that it's like lots of people are doing homeworks, and especially in graduation now, they're using large language models to reply. And I remember to read somewhere that one of the large language models passed in the bar exam in the US to be a lawyer. So we're seeing things like, it's crazy. Okay, this is getting out of control. But I see that that's also opportunity to criticize the system that we have, educational system. Because if the educational system rewards answer just like to memorize certain types of questions and answers, that for me is not education, that's memorizing. Education is the process of being critically over the knowledge that you have. So you see you get in touch with that knowledge. That knowledge transforms you, and you start to think over that knowledge, and you change it. So that process. So I think that that's also an opportunity to maybe create universities and schools that incentivize people to be more critic about the knowledge that they're receiving. And I also, and that's my personal opinion, is that I don't think that colleges, universities, or whatever should have exams like the correct answer. I think it should be projects. Okay, we have this project. You have to finish this. You have to do all these steps. You have to research this. You have to do this. You have to do this activity. It should be like that since kindergarten. Of course, each one according to its ability. So that's, I think that's evident now with this type of technology.
Yeah, it's also like I agree, because I had a certain case. For me, it's easier not to memorize all these lectures because I had some course. For me, it's easier to work on some project. It's also good for my brain. I will boost my creativity or exploration. At the same time, I don't have to memorize, because when I'm using, I know I'm practically using these concepts. I'm learning this, so I will memorize it in the longer term than in a short term. I memorize all these answers in one night, and then after the exam I will forget it anyway. So
You know that I was a teacher at Brazil for the middle school and high school, and I remember to tell to my students that um, have you already had the sensation that when you're trying to cheat for an exam, and you tried to write it down, all the knowledge from the semester in a small piece of paper that maybe could fit in the palm of your hand, or you write it on your hand, or whatever, you try to synthesize all that knowledge into something. And then when you started to doing the test, you noticed that you didn't need that paper.
Mhm.
So basically, for me, that is the type of education that we need to do it. Not cheating, of course, but doing the research based on like how can I synthesize this knowledge and do it. Like there's one person that was very good at that. His name is he's very well known in the pedagogical area. He's I think one of the authors with most doctor honoris causa in the, I think in the world. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but his name is Paulo Freire, and he was a pedagogical educator in Brazil, and he was so good at teaching people that he could alphabetize someone. He could make someone could read, write, and read critically in 4 weeks. An adult that never had read anything or could write anything in his life. So I think, and there is a quote that he says that from his book. This book, it's a very good one. It's called "The Pedagogy of the Oppressor." And one thing that he says is that people think that knowledge is like a bank deposit. So I have the full knowledge and you have none. So I will deposit my knowledge over you. And it's not, doesn't work like that. When I teach, I also learn. How many times we had that experience of teaching something and seeing that we don't know, then we studied and we learned, then we teach next time, we understand. And the person who learns also teach, because he makes questions that you don't know, and you see, oh, I don't have this gap. I didn't understand this yet. If I can't explain this, it's because I didn't understand. So that's how I think it should focus education. And large language models is incredible to do that in that case, because you can synthesize a lot of knowledge. But of course, you need to be critical of it. Like how much you were willing to trust big companies that control lots of information and they are feeding you information. Of course, just to conclude, one more thing is that Paulo Freire says is there is no neutral ideology. Everyone has an ideology. And so even companies have ideologies. And so we have to select which ideologies we're going to be into it. And he classified two types of ideologies, two main types. There are many ideologies in the world, of course. Two main types of ideologies. The first one is inclusive ideology. So it's the type of ideology that I accept other ideologies, other worldviews. And the other type of ideologies is that exclude other ideologies, that I don't accept other worldviews or other ways of thinking. So in the end, we can summarize in these two types of ideologies. So we should be wise when we select what the large language model is offering us an ideology that opens our mind, or something that closes our mind. It doesn't allow us to question or to think.
I do agree that, okay, to summarize, I guess I agree that yes, organic brain, let's say organic learning, or old system learning is the best, because the more you learn, try to understand and digest all these ideas, which I really love. That's why I like making reviews or reading, digesting ideas. So I guess that's what you're also saying for the students, that if they try to digest these concepts, really try to understand organic, can we call it organic brain, organic learning?
Organic learning, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, again, to the next point, we have sustainability and production. So again, this is also essential point to cover. So in today's world, of course, on the one side, we have extreme radical future awaiting us, or at least what the IPCC report is warning us about. And on the other hand, we have this, what you said, the big industries, the production-driven system. So what is more essential in reality, and how to balance? As a person who has a scientific background in environmental sciences.
Yes, that's a great question. Great question. And it's a very complicated question as well, because I don't remember who said that sentence, but it says that complex problem needs complex solutions. So there's not like one thing that would correct everything. There are a series of steps, so a series of things, procedures that we have to do in order to achieve either more production, more sustainability, or both. My point of view is that sustainability should be at first, of course, and that's also a philosophical question and etymological question of the world, of the word. When we say sustainability, it brings us an idea of stabilization, of a stable system. To be sustainable, we imagine a system that is stable, that is not degrading, and it's not also gaining more. How can I say? For example, if we get a forest, if we want a sustainable forest, and I'm going to extract resources from a sustainable forest, I want the forest to keep in balance with what I get from it. So sustainable is a state that is stable in some poor definition of it. If I extract more than I need from that area, that will degrade the area. It will destroy, it will affect the balance. Yes, that's the word, balance. Okay. So, and if I don't explore that resource, the forest will recover and I will get less resource from that forest because I'm not exploring it or whatever. That's a very simple example. So I have a critic, and there are more people to critic. By the way, I have a book from this person. So this book is reflected, but it basically says the how can I translate that? Like the contradiction, the contradiction and the limits of growth. You could criticize sustainable development because it's a contradiction of words. To develop, I have to destabilize the system. And to be sustainable, I have to stabilize the system. So if I want to develop, I have to degrade, use resources. I have to explore, consume more. If I want to keep sustainable, I have to keep stable and balanced. So it's a contradiction of terms. So I think that now we live in a way, well, at least mostly of the central countries, like what we call it, the first world countries, the central capitalistic countries, they live in a way that they live better than a king in the Middle Ages. Now we live like very well. We have water. We have pipes that bring us hot water. We have fridge. That's a lot of things when you think from where we came from as human beings, as a species, right? So I think sustainability should be a priority, especially because of climate change, of course. We are coming to a point that it's a no turning back point. So it means that the feedback that's going to happen of overheating the planet, it won't stop even if we start doing now anything to cool the earth or start emitting CO2 emissions. So, and why do I say all that? Like this article that was published in 2012. It's from Jorge Jimenez, and it's an article that name is "We already grow enough food for 10 billion people and still can't end hunger." It's in the Journal of Sustainable Agriculture. And so he shows that at least 30% of the food we wasted, especially in Europe and United States and those, let's call it Western countries, right? Because that study was made mainly on those areas. So that's in 2012. We're in 2025. So for sure we can feed even 11 billion people. The main problem is distribution and waste, and better. And going back to what I said, systems theory, we need to improve the system. We need to better the system and take away the obstacles that do that. So, and I remember that article, they say that hunger is not about scarcity, it's about inequity and injustice. And also it needs a structural change, and it shouldn't have corporates controlling the agricultural sector. It should be like a basic human rights, right? Like eating, having a living, a place to live, those things. So that was a very interesting. The article that I said about the 30-40% of food waste in developing countries is from Charles and Godfrey. It's from 2010, and at that time showed that 30. By the way, at Beta Center, they are also studying research how to lower the waste, how to waste less food. There is a whole sector dedicated to that. So going back to the beginning of the interview, like when you said about like no, when I was saying about systems, there I think about the way as a general systems theory, right, and not in a Cartesian way about isolating the problem. Hunger is not a problem; it's just about giving food to the person. It's a complex system that is generating an output that we call hunger. So we need to understand the system, change it because we already produce enough food, and change this system in order to make the output being people not dying of starvation. So that's one of the things.
To play or to be more like a debatable case, I will try to be a devil's advocate. So
yes, okay, good.
So changing the system sounds, of course, good, revolutionary. That yes, this is something that in politics works. That's also, I think, a big disadvantage of Trump, because people were so tired of the same people coming to the power that they wanted to try something new, fresh, radical, which actually disrupting the whole world, perhaps. So changing the system sounds good, but what about, because this is something, how to say, as you said, contradictory. We cannot have to the complex system, we cannot have one answer. So basically we have to somehow fine tune a small sub areas and try to focus more to these sub areas and try to provide solution to sub areas, which actually I agree that Europe does very well compared to other regions of the country, and I don't have experience with other regions except Central Asia. We're in Europe now promoting science, and also like each scientific area, even if within agriculture, within fertilizers, or making the fertilizer or applying it to the field, we have subsections, subgroups that are specifically focused on this topic. That's what I really like about Europe, science in Europe. And what you also said, like, yes, we need to, how to say, change the system. Okay, perhaps since today we are more like speaking openly, I could also tell that's also what I really try to promote, that yes, we have science, but is it practical? Like the adoption of science, is it directly being communicated to the society? Is it contributing to the society? I understand that some of the scientific breakthroughs or areas are not immediately has a direct impact on society. It takes some time, but it has a very high impact, which happened again. I will say Catherine Corico. I will also provide a link to her research. She has devoted her life, and Robert Sapolsky as well, in different areas. So coming back to this, my concept was like to speak with farmers or to communicate with scientists. That's also like the aim of the podcast, bring scientists. And I'm also planning, I don't know how long it will take. I really want to interview also farmers, or make a documentary, a movie about farmers. That's one of my long-term goals, bucket list. So in this context, what can interest farmers to adopt sustainable practices? Because you are the person is who is a scientist in environmental sciences. Talking about sustainable agriculture, studying sustainable agriculture, we get into some academic bubble, but in reality,
Yes, yes. Yes, that's like what I see, that that's now the main trend here in Europe about, okay, how can we get in touch with the people, right? And those things. And again, I go back a little bit to Paulo Freire, okay? Like, we need that, there are several things on that. We need to improve, we need to apply scientific methods. And if we go back to what we talked about education, about large language models, about the way education should be, like, we don't usually apply the scientific method about the how good is the educational system, in a way of how good is the way that we develop a thesis or a dissertation, how is it good, or are there other ways to improve, to make a person be a master, a doctor in his area, without being the traditional way of having a thesis director. We didn't apply. I know that there are studies that have been made, and also they know there are some psychological aspects of doing a thesis and those things. What I mean is that we should start applying the knowledge on the scientific method on those areas that exactly that we have those questions. Okay, so why are we not reaching the farmers? Okay, and then I will give you some examples. There is you know Richard Feynman, right? You already heard about Richard Feynman. There was one time that he went to Brazil. He went there to teach at the university, if I'm not mistaken, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And there's this book that was published that the name is "Are You Kidding, Mr. Feynman?" And in that book, he talks about his experience there. And it seems that I don't remember the exact context what was, and it was teaching, and he noticed that the Brazilians there, the top researchers, Brazilian, they were there, and he asked, like, what is the equation of, I don't know, the Fermat theory or whatever? And people like said the whole equation without blinking, like they know everything, like what is the derivative of this and that, and like, and people got. Now he got a crystal, and he, for the same equation, He said, okay, if I get this crystal, I put on the opposite direction of the light, and it happens this, and paralyzed, what will happen? And people got like this, like, I don't understand. And say, you already answered. No, we don't understand. And in the end, was the equation that they were reciting it. So we have to change the ways that we interact with people who we are talking. First of all, I like those YouTube videos that say the 5 levels of knowledge. So it starts with you from a kindergarten, explain what is a black hole, and a top physics professor. And then from people with 12 years old, 18, and then on graduation, a master, doctors, and postdoc. So we need to know that knowledge is like an onion. So it goes in what is I forgot the name in English. It was in shapes, right? It was like with layers. Sorry, so it goes in layers. So we are going more depth on that research area that we got in contact with more complex themes. So we need, okay, how can we synthesize information? As I said, like Paulo Freire, how we can do that scientifically? How can we scale that? Now, about what you were saying about the farmers, like how can they adopt agricultural practices sustainable? There are plenty of examples in the world, plenty examples. Like it's not, uh, um, it's difficult to do the transition because, as I said, the system doesn't want the transition. Why? Because sustainable doesn't mean it's profitable. So it's not correlated. It can be profitable. Yeah, maybe it could be. But if you want profitability, you're going to use agrotoxics, you're going to use transgenics, you're going to use heavy fertilizers, you want to use everything because you want to produce more. So in order to commodify that thing, and you can get the most out of it, right? So there's one great example in Brazil that's called the landless movement. It's a Marxist movement of people because over there we're waiting for their land reform. That is in the constitution of the 88 constitution. 1988 is when we got our constitution after the civil military dictatorship. And it was promised to make a land reform, and they didn't have. And there are lands over there are farms that were used for criminal activity or were from the Amazon rainforest where they deforested illegally because it belonged to the state, and they occupied from some landowners, big landowners there, including politicians. So they occupied those lands, and I had the pleasure of working with some of them over there when I did my graduation. When they occupy a land, it goes through a judicial process in order to give that land to them and divide. And there are a lot of rules. It's not simply I invade a land and that land is mine. It's not that. The land should be embarked by the justice. It should be proved that the land is in not being used for productive reasons. It's using for speculation. There are a checklist. They do that. Okay, so what they do, they started applying agroecology and syntropic concepts in their agriculture. So lots of families with 1 hectare, 2 hectares, families, they produce alongside with the university, in my case, the Federal University of Uberlândia, we did this incentivation of teaching them and them also teaching us, because they have traditional practices, how to make more sustainable agroforestry, agroecology. And if you look up, you will see that MST, Landless Movement, they are the biggest organic rice producers in Latin America. They export, so they don't use agrotoxics, only using concepts of agroecology. So that's one example. And I could mention other examples. It's also in the UNFCCC. You can see that they say in Bangladesh, there's a community that manage forests, preserving local biodiversity in the Pacific Islands, reviving traditional agriculture and agricultural practices, and restoration of traditional fish ponds in Hawaii. So there are already plenty of practices that you could do it. The thing is, probably most of them are not profitable. And I don't know if it will be. It can be that maybe sometimes it gets profitable. but this current state of the art, as far as I know, it's not, because it's not meant to be profitable. I had the opportunity to work in some farms where in 2 hectares we produce so much food for 5, 6 people that we have to give it away because we couldn't do anything. There was so many food, like, okay, we can't eat this, and there's no way to store it. We have to start eat. Like in the house that I lived there in Oberlândia in Brazil, like I had this, like the size of this area here behind me, and I planted like 3 trees there, a lemon tree and 2 species of fruits over there in my backyard. And I remember it produced so much fruits that I had to give to the neighbors. In the IPCC report, the from 2021, the AR6 IPCC report, they talk about that, how indigenous people and traditional knowledge should be incorporated in policies, and also should be, as I will say, dialectical with scientific knowledge. I will give you another example. There is this concept of black earth or terra preta in Amazon rainforest, and basically traditional tribes over there, the indigenous people, or originary people there, they simply occupied the place. And when they started seeing that there were no animals more, because human beings make animals being scared of them because we hunt them, of course. So at one time, animals will notice that we shouldn't be around there. So what they did, they burned down their village and abandoned that area for 50 years, maybe. And once it go back, the biochar or whatever was there incremented the soil, and they discovered that the soil is super rich, this super rich soil. And there are plenty of examples. Like so, the problem is, and going back about the system, changing systems. There is a Mark Fish book. I don't know if you have the possibility of reading. Well, there's Mark Fish was a professor, and there is a book that he published. It's called Capitalism Realism. Is there no alternative? It's a very good book, and he said it is easier to imagine the end of the road than the end of capitalism. So we are so stuck into this type of system that we can't imagine an alternative. So like we should start thinking other ways of living. People, and like it doesn't matter. Like when people tell me, okay, Eduardo, what do we do? What do we do? We change system. I don't know, anarchism, communism, or whatever. I say, I don't know the answer. I know that this way is not working. It's not working since 78 that we know. It's not working. We already know that. We have a lot of data. We have to change. How? I don't know, but we have to change it fast.
I would like to thank you for bringing this topic of indigenous knowledge and also talking about different countries, because usually I'm ashamed, of course, but that's what I'm being taught now, is that I only know about European, and the more I get to know, yeah, as you said, like we also had recently a talk with Mikhail Bachuk about sustainable model business models in sustainable manner. And basically what we had a discussion, and he was also telling me that actually the that our grandparents, because he's also from Poland and we both have a post-country background, that yeah, actually the old habits that were not destructive, his grandparents were purposing all the products in a manner that they will not have waste. So and then the idea was that, yeah, then old habits, maybe we should make it somehow trendy. Yes, I agree that, yes, your criticism makes sense. Yes, I agree that we have been for too long promising and extending the deadline to deliver the promises, and it has been a very long time. But at the same time, we have to keep realistic, because the current functioning system, our life everything depends on it, and we cannot and one switch just change it. So we have this small, and in Europe, I would say there are big attempts on this, and also like farmers are receiving a lot of subsidies to adopt sustainable farming, and yeah, we should not undermine the effort being done. But on the other point, I completely agree that yes, we are now looking for sustainable farming, sustainable agriculture, sustainable business model, or all is for the recall of our deep connection that we have lost with nature, I guess. So
You know that when I was in Germany, I was at the Technical University of Munich doing an internship there. And I remember talking with some people, some of my colleagues there. And I remember they were saying there are some kids in Germany that they think that the cow is purple because of the chocolate. So, because they never saw a cow in their lives. It's like, and I don't have to go to Germany. In Brazil, there's also people never seen an animal. Like they think that the food comes to the shelf of the supermarket, and it's like that you find in nature. The the main problem of that is we live this system, the system that we're living, this model of system, the capitalistic system, is based on the division of the labor. And the problem with the division of the labor is that that incentivizes as well the division of knowledge and also always subdivisions. So that's why, if, for example, I don't have to go very far, like Taylorism, when we started the Industrial Revolution, what he saw was if I did the same task that was done with one person to create one chair, it took like 10 days. If I put 5 people doing a part of a chair, at the end, in one day, I could create 10 chairs with 5 people because each one specialized in one part. The problem of that is that I isolate my knowledge only to that part. I don't see the whole chair. So the same thing is applied to the system, to everything, to knowledge, to culture. That's why we see bubbles, right? And we say we live in a bubble, because that's how the system behaves. The system behaves isolating, dividing the knowledge. What we need to do is go back to the integration of knowledge. So, and I think that universities should step down of this position of superiority, of we are the holders of knowledge, we know everything, and acquire what it should be the scientific method of criticism. It's I like to call I like to call critical thinking. What is the way that I describe critical thinking is it's the possibility of thinking that you are mistaken. For me, critical thinking is that. So it's the possibility that to know that you are mistaken. Maybe you don't know something too well as you know, and that's the difference between dogma. Dogma you can criticize, you can speak. So that's the main thing.
okay, since we are being critical, I just want to say this thing that as you said, we are living in a bubble. Yes, I do agree. How I see the system is most of the time, that's also why perhaps we have developed this so environmental anxiety, let's say, but we will talk about it later, that we keep thinking, we keep asking, but yes, we do have environmental issues. As a scientist, intellectual, as you said, we have a big responsibility to provide solutions. To a criticism from my perspective is that it's not about going to the conference and showing the nice poster or presentation and then publishing a data, publishing and having fancy models, and then okay, next fancy model, next publication. It's about okay, did you reach to the point? Like, did you really care about that it is being adopted in real world? So maybe I misunderstood you. Do you mean like the knowledge should be adopted too in a
Okay.
practical terms by the farmers?
Yes, that as well should be applied to the practical. But I mean that that's a trend that happened, and it still happens, at least in Brazil, at some parts here in Europe. That is that I studied soil, for example, right, and that happened. Curiously, that happened once I was there at Tom University, and it was so funny because it was this professor, um, and he was talking about soil parameters. And I remember that he asked, okay, so what do you think is the bulk density of this soil? And there were plenty of soil experts there, and none could guess a number. And I remember I was seeing, okay, I was thinking some numbers, like, okay, 1.3, it's peatland, so probably it's 0.9. I was thinking something like that. But I was like ashamed to talk. I was like, I will not talk it. I'm not the expert here. There are plenty of people who know way more. And nobody talked. And there was this guy who was working on the field there. He's not a doctor. He's like a grad student. He's always working on the soil. And he said, oh, I guess this soil is this density, this bulk density. And the person looked like surprised, said, well, you're right. And I remember that impacted me so much, because what I say is that we shouldn't discard practical knowledge. We should use the practical knowledge put under the microscope as a scientific method, because how I see the scientific method is the same way I see mathematics. It's a universal language, a way that we can transfer knowledge in in the same ground that everyone can understand. And well, that's what I believe. What was the other part you say about the criticism?
Yeah. I guess no, it's just I agree also. I think the same applies to AI because yes, it's a very powerful tool, but AI is not going to solve all your problems. You need a field experience, you need the practical experience. The more we have a saying in Russian that practice makes it perfect. So basically, as you said, we have the same situation in Russia. Most of the lab workers and institutions, uh, they have a rich knowledge and experience because they're when you are in the lab, you are basically doing everything, all the analysis. You are a responsible person there, and that kind of also provides a valuable knowledge to you because
Yes.
you are
Yes.
the person. Yeah, yeah. Also, I agree with your point about the practical part. Myself, I'm very ashamed. I studied fertilization, precision fertilization, but my plants, my
No.
house plants are
Yes.
having some issues, so I'm using Google. I should use my knowledge. Actually, I should identify the yeah.
But that's the thing. That's also one thing that Paulo Freire talks about is the object that you study. It shouldn't be just an isolated object. It should be part of your way of living. For example, um, I, as a geographer and also agroecologist, I tried to learn the theoretical aspects, but remember that knowledge is dialogical, that Paulo Freire called it. So it's always theory into practice and practice into theory. It's not just one way around. The practice helps to explain the theory, and the theory helps to explain the practice. So it's always the two ways communicating. It's like when you're going to make a cake. You have the how to do it. You have all the ingredients. You have how to do it. But once you do it, you start tweaking with it. You say, "Oh, this is not good. Maybe if I do this, it will improve." So that's the dialogical thing that should be on science. So what I mean, I don't criticize a person who works on the lab 24/7, doesn't have contact with soil, or, for example, a person that work with lions, a biologist that work with lions and never saw a lion in his life. I'm not criticizing that, although it's a little bit weird. A person who works with that all life and never saw it. Okay, but let's extend that hypothesis,
Protocol.
right? So I don't criticize that once that person doesn't think that he's the keeper of all knowledge over that. That's the thing, because the problem of criticism is that the solution of the criticism uh, to that ego approach, that I know everything, I am the owner of the truth, or I am the owner of this knowledge. No, you know a lot. You have lots of merits. Of course, you did a PhD. You know about fertilization. For you don't treat well your plants, maybe, okay, but that doesn't disqualify you, of course, about because your work has practical usage. So maybe it's just when you start applying that to your own field of area, and that's one of the things that I like a lot about Brazilian universities, is that usually universities are center of knowledge, and the first researches that we do, because of budget, we don't have a lot of budget as well, but the first research that we do, it's around the university, it's in the community around. So in my graduation, it was about the environmental diagnosis of a river that went near the university. So I studied that. The other person studied about the history of the neighborhood. Another person studied about the economical impacts of the construction of a new. So the university served as a hub also for, over there in Brazil, it's very common someone who doesn't have a knowledge in anything go inside the department, find that a professor, goes there to the door because it's open. Everyone can enter and go. There is no checkpoints to enter the university. So you can get there to the office of the professor, knock the door, if he's there, if he's available, if he's not angry at you, and you can ask, sorry, you're this expert on soil. Look, it's because I have my farm and it's happening this. What can I do? And he says, okay, maybe we can write a project. I'll put one of my students to analyze your farm and see if we can, and then we get some conclusions of it. So you see, that's the integration that I'm usually talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I agree also to the listeners, just to mention, because I have a background of very strong admiration with Brazil linked with the Sebastião Salgado.
Sebastian Salgado. Yeah, he passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah, recently, a few days ago.
Yeah.
And also, this person's movie have inspired, have given me inspiration to try my luck in movie making, or I am actually really motivated, and his documentary changed my life. And as you said, this documentary made me realize that yes, we have lost this connection with nature as well. I guess what you're also saying, like we have to have a theoretical knowledge, but if you are not applying it to the daily life, it would be as if you are giving an advice to someone, but you are yourself not following that. Your words don't match up your actions. Therefore, I completely agree, and I strongly suggest whenever we, as an environmental science as well, like what kind of sustainable habits do you have, or how are you adopting it in your daily life? As you said, I'm also trying to practice to do some little research with my plants. It killed some of my plants at the office, but okay, funny story. But that's how I'm also learning, I guess. Also, what I found funny, now I don't have an access, but I really want to have my own a lab at home in a garage to experiment with little things. Yeah. Also to anaerobic digestion, for example, I'm extremely interested in the idea, and I want to try to build a small one and see how it works. I guess this kind of like implementing the practical knowledge into the theoretical knowledge into the practice, and also what you said, like having this kind of if the farmer is having an issue, it's communicating with the scientist who can help actually, right? That's the connection.
Yes. So I going back to that part that we said, how can we translate, how can we give that information back to the farmers? And it's basically open a channel, giving the possibility for them to come ask us what we can do, and we say, okay, let's check it out, what we can do, and ask him, and he say, oh, I use this practice, and then later on, maybe you're gonna see that his practice is a novel practice that nobody is doing, and you say, okay, well, maybe I can use that to research and scale up that for another farm and see, and that's how it goes. That's how scientific method usually goes. Like you get in touch with a problem, with a question, and work on it.
Yeah. Okay. climate change and consequences. How long is too long, or how long is long?
Yes.
What are the long-term effects of fire on soil properties? It's related to your research.
Yes. In my PhD, I researched about wildfires and their effects on soil properties. So basically, the problem is that we have, and that's we're talking early on about having novel publishment. Every time I have a nice model, then next, publish next. And what we saw is there is a lack of study and there is an urgent need of long-term studies. But of course, the problem is what is considered long-term. When we consider 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 100, we don't have a clear one. One of the things that we noticed is long-term usually is related to budget. So when you have finance after 5, 8 years, 10 years, we call it long term. So that was one of the things that we noticed. Now, what we noticed is that at least for Mediterranean area, we noticed that some prescribed fire helps to improve some aspects of the soil, but we always should be careful when we say improve some aspects, but also it's not good for other aspects, right? Because it's a disturbance. And as the word disturbance is, this word, as it says, it disturbs the stable version of the soil, the microbiology, and also the vegetation that there is present there. So you're disturbing. When you disturb, you start changing aspects and favoring some species and favoring some things. When I do a prescribed fire, for example, I increase the pH of the soil and the hydrophobicity also of the soil I increase. And what we see is sometimes long term means that those disturbances last for 30 years, for example. It could last way longer than we imagine. There are some studies that show that it recovered in 10 years. There are other studies that after 28 years, it didn't recover anything. Um, so, about climate change and consequences. So, what can I say about wildfires and soil and vegetation and ecology and vegetation succession and the succession of species? Is that climate change? That's a very well known fact now. Uh, Climate change makes the extreme events more frequent. So basically, if we had this what we call mega fires here in Spain. We had once the return interval was 50 years. Now we are having every 5 years, 10 years. And it will come to a time that it will become yearly. And then we will start to have another type of extreme event. So what we're seeing is that um, this we are, of course, this climate change will select species. And now we are talking about resilience, Mediterranean landscape resilience, and resilient agriculture, resilient agroforestry, and resilience. And the word resilience is the capacity of being disturbed and returning again to this natural state. That's the definition of resilience. So, in order to go back to this natural state, it shouldn't be disturbed again before being recovered. So when we think about resilience of the soil, we have to promote soil health. We have to promote the improvement of the soil. And that comes in many ways. For example, I already heard about the inoculation of mycorrhizal on soil to improve some species of fungi. I already heard about mulching, for example, after wildfire, doing mulching to avoid soil erosion. Uh, Another thing that we could do, like planting species that are more resilient to wildfires. Um, what, um, what else? Doing fuel management, biomass management, forests. But of course, that's for Mediterranean forests. When we talk about Amazon rainforest, that's not the logic. The logic is completely different over there. And also the biome that we call, from where I come, Minas Gerais, it's called a cerrado. It's like a savanna landscape. Over there also we have frequent wildfires, and the species are developed somewhat to be resilient to wildfires. There is an excellent book that talks about that. Very good book if you are into soil properties and learn about fire history and those things. Is from Andrew S. Scott. He's a professor. I don't remember now the university. I think it's Oxford University. Yes, Oxford University, problem. And he wrote a book that's super good to read. It's called Burning Planet. It's a very good book, and it shows exactly soil, vegetation. He makes like a very long study showing that since we have plants, we have wildfires. So wildfire is not something that we're going to extinguish. And basically, on the research, we're seeing that we have some key factors influencing soil. Basically, fire intensity or severity, climate and climate vegetation time, the type of vegetation that is introduced there. Here in Spain, we have the main problem of having mega wildfires. It's because of rural abandonment, the rural exodus. So people are concentrating on cities, and before using gas, they used wood to heat their houses, their farms, used wood regularly. And because of that, we lowered the biomass content on wildfires. So we had a wildfire, it was not a big it's a big thing. It was big, but not as a mega wildfire. And now we are having wildfires that's called, as Mark Castaño, that is a firefighter here, the leader of firefighters in Catalonia. He said we have this mega wildfires that they create this pyrocumulus. It's like a nimbus cumulus cloud, but it's made out of ashes and sparks. And sometimes that collapses and it creates new sparks of wildfire kilometers away. So now we're seeing that because we're not managing forests, we're not taking care of soils. And so, as I said, it's a system. So you see, like, wildfires got increased because people are leaving the rural areas, and we are importing food from other countries, since we have lots of areas in Spain to produce, but people don't go back to the farm, and because of that creates mega wildfires because people are not using wood. So you see, it's a system. So we need to attack the connections of the systems and try to change it.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting, and all of this needs to be solved with the generation that thinks the cows are purple.
Yes, but there's still hope.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting point. Also, maybe not a fun way of introducing it, not scientific way. There is a cartoon called Croods Family. I watched it in Russian. Croods Family, I guess in English, and the second one, it's a wild people. Somehow funny way of these wild people, how they became a human being, and there are people called better men that completely isolated themselves from the wildlife and throwing away all the garbage out of borders. And that's somehow, I guess, reflects how we today live. We have isolated ourselves with all this digital tool. Now with the digital, even completely isolated people who actually, yeah, I personally thought, I personally had no idea where the pineapples are grown. Like, to be honest, I had to watch it.
Yeah.
So we just have a perception about the world, what the TV or what the movies, what the media tells us. Meanwhile, as you said, the importance of interacting with. I completely agree. Yes, we have to get in touch with nature, and what you said, like, yes, you need to also follow up with small action, which I also try to promote, is that, yes, get into the nature, just try to, like, uh, look at the plants or
Yes. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't. It can be just like taking care of one plant first and see how it goes, or going to a walk. Like, I met this person at Beta that he walks the same trail, counting the number of butterflies. Already 25 years doing the same route and counting the butterflies. Now he has like this plotted of butterflies decline population. It can be something like very simple. Like you can, okay, I will always go check, see this rock and see what it does. Or it starts to be a small curiosity.
Yeah. Also, recently I visited EGU a few months ago, and I met again with my friend. We met like 5 years, 7 years ago already, a long time friend. And yeah, he very interesting person to talk with. Not a science person. He basically when we are walking in the parks, he collects some grass, and he said, "No, this you can eat." I had no idea. So when I with him, I'm always learning something. And recently, when I was in Austria, I visited him for dinner. He has developed a small compost digestion system. So basically, they keep all their organic waste there, and he's asking from me as a person from environmental science that it's not decomposing. But
Yeah.
I luckily I had the knowledge. I could explain him that microorganisms digest all of this, so that means that there is not enough microorganisms. So basically, you have extreme heat or extreme wetness. It's not favorable for microorganisms. So there's something is wrong. Fortunately,
No, but you see, like that's that's the thing. Like you had the knowledge, you know how to explain it. You didn't work with composting, I believe, or fermentation doing that thing, but your knowledge helped him guide him to what could be the solution. I think that's the most important than memorizing and knowing for real what is it.
yeah. Also, depends on the country, I would say. Same I noticed in Sweden that people are actually much more in touch with nature. And of course, they have the highest forest density. And
Yeah.
the same I noticed in Austria. In Austria, people are allowed to pick up some of the vegetation if that's eatable or if they want to. And also, they try to reserve the ecosystem over there. And I guess, of course, there's also some of the debate that the forest area is increasing, meanwhile the agriculture area is decreasing. There is less people interested in driving agriculture. That's complete story. But I guess today we actually discussed a very important aspect that is commonly overlooked. Try to be critical as much as possible. So thank you for your perspective and also sharing your knowledge as well. All the books and also studies that you mentioned will be in the description. You can
Yes.
yeah. I also have some general questions, if you don't
Yes.
mind. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. No worry. Yes.
So to sum up, how to deal with eco anxiety?
My perspective is anxiety is usually is related to the future, to controlling the future. So trying to make some types of management that is maybe possible or not possible. It's about uncertainty in the future. You trying to control the future. So when you think about eco anxiety, that affects a lot of people like us that research on that because we're always in touch with devastating news. The only remedy that I know against eco anxiety is organization and action. Is the only thing that I know that can do. When you feel that you're doing something, you start feeling anxious because you know that you're doing something. So anxiety can paralyze you to do anything. So we have many activists. There is a very good book called, it's in Spanish. I don't know if there is translation in English, but it's called Pathways of Freedom, Senderos de Libertad, from Javier Moro. And he writes about the history of Chico Mendes. I think, I don't know if you heard about Chico Mendes. Chico Mendes was an activist. He lived in Amazon rainforest. He was taking out from the rubber from the trees. So was taking this in order to create rubber for the World War II. Later on, actually in the 60s, because his grandfather worked there. Basically, they lived isolated in communities. and there was also like slave labor over there, and there was many abuses that they were doing because the government incentivized people to colonize the Amazon rainforest, right? To colonize, trying to live there, occupy the land. And what happened is that he started to see how degrading was the mining, how degrading was some aspects, and started fighting against the abuses and of the landowners, of the government, and everything. And he organized between them, and he promoted what we call it what's it, reserve, Chico Mendes reserve. It's a type of way of living where people extract resources from the Amazon rainforest with the lowest disturbance as possible. So they extract many things: medicinal plants, food, and to export wood. They manage. So that's a very good example. So he started to act. So I think that's the main reason. You don't have to save the world. You have to start organizing. Maybe if you live in a building, you don't have to convince the whole building to adopt something sustainable. You can convince just your neighbor. Start with your family. Then from that you scale up and use the scientific method. Use the scientific method. Okay, so I tried to interact with the whole neighborhood, with the whole building. That went well. Okay, let me try to use the scientific method to that. What went wrong? This. Okay, let me research on that. How can I interact better with people? So the best way to do that is action. And we are in need of people to act. We have plenty of NGOs, we have plenty of organizations that they are working, and they need help. They need help. They need all the help they can get. So what I say is organize and fight. I guess for the change you want to see it. Once you start doing that, and as I say, you don't have to change the world. You can change just the way you live. That's enough. There is one famous professor, it's Peter Schad. He's from Technical University of Munich. He's a superstar in soil sciences. He's like one of the best in soil science. And so funny because he walks barefoot. Even in snow, he walks barefoot. It's crazy. And he works with soil because he thinks he needs to be walking on the soil and it's good for him. He believes that. And because that there is a sect of students that does the same. Like, so maybe when you start doing something so small like that, you start to incentivize people. For example, as I mentioned, in Brazil, we have this is Rios Libres, free rivers. This is in Chile and also in Brazil. So we're seeing that they were trying to create a dam, a hydroelectric dam, in a river where in a waterfall where we use for rappelling, for kayaking, for tourism. That people went there to integrate with nature. They wanted to destroy everything and build a hydroelectric dam that wouldn't generate enough electricity for the city. It's something political project. So we started simply like, we don't want that. We started talking with people. Okay, let's go there, protest. And we started organizing with people, and we started very small. We started talking to people. There were like two main activists, my friends were there. I mostly helped them work out it part. And then we started like talking to people, and then it grew to something so big that it was possible to stop the construction of the hydroelectric. And now it is a protected area. So you don't need to start very big. You just need to start. And sometimes there is a famous quote from Rosa Luxemburg that she says, sometimes the most revolutionary thing that you can do is just say it out loud what is happening. So sometimes just being able to say what's going on, it's already revolutionary. So, but one thing that you want to do is, this system is very stable, and we have to destabilize the system that we are living in if we want to change it. So we need to say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Okay, we have to change and stop polluting and stop creating CO2 and those things. Okay, so maybe we should live in a way everyone, not just a fraction of people or people from other countries, everyone, maybe we should stop doing this. Like there's plenty of studies saying about reducing the work hours in Europe, because they noticed that when you work less, surprise, you pollute less because you don't have to commute. So people live better, like that is. So
For COVID times, when
yeah,
seeing
for example, COVID times were perfect. You see, when we stopped, suddenly, all of a sudden,
wildlife
things
reappeared.
vanished. The water was clean again. So like, and now, unfortunately, in Brazil, we are going backwards, because now in Brazil we're approving the scale 6-to-1 work. So work 6 days and rest 1 day, and that's a very terrible. And we're also approving the use of lots of agrotoxics. So, and you see, it's like we already know. What I usually say is, we already have all the tools to fight climate change. You just have to pick which is your fight that you're willing to fight for. And of course, it's going to be painful. It's going to be discomfortable. It's going to be, sorry for the word, a pain in the ass. Yes, it will be, but it will be worse if you don't do anything. Be sure, it will be way worse if you don't do anything. So I think that's the way.
There was a saying, I cannot remember the name. Ignorance is the most ignorance, or being quiet, is actually the most hurtful. You think that you are not doing anything, but actually you are, by your silence, by your
Yes.
inaction, you are
Yes.
just much more, yeah.
In Brazil, there is a saying from the civilian military dictatorship that we had there, that we said the ones who are quiet or don't talk, they consent with the oppressor. So when I don't do anything, I consent, because if I do something that you don't like, you will tell me that you don't like, and I won't do it again. But if you don't say anything, then I think it's okay. So that's the thing. Being quiet as well is also saying. I like a sentence from there was this interview from Greta Thunberg that it really impacted me. What she said, that she said, like, if you are an environmental activist and you are not disturbing, like, not disturbing, like, if you're not, like, making people mad, the ones in power or the people who take decision mad at you, or the people who are doing all this destruction, they are not mad at you, maybe you should review your actions, because you're not being effective, it's not being useful. Because if you want change, change means discomfortness. It means that you will make some people mad at you. It means that some people will get angry at you, and that's the way we will have to change.
Yeah, everyone, uh, I agree, in action. And since this episode we are being about actions, I would say, like, if you say things, you have to personally follow up, and I will give several examples from myself. Barefoot, yes, that's also what I started practicing. Really, and
Really?
even with the mud, actually, I really believe that, I don't know, it's just being connected with nature, and this is something I'm practicing recently as well. During the weekends, I have to go somewhere surrounded by nature, green, bird watching, or astronomy whatsoever. Um, Also, as much as possible, try not to use the lift, or just use just the stairs, or try to use one close for a long time and reuse. Um, as well, there are some organizations that I really know, that scientists like us, very young, or scientists who you can rely, who annual monthly report their actions in social media or on the website. You can donate to them as well. There are plenty of ways of contributing. It's not about, I don't have time. It's, yes, you may not have time, but there are people who are already doing so. You can support them as well. As you said, like this river action as well. I'm sure that there were some volunteers who were working. You could
No one, everybody worked, had their jobs, and everybody had their activities, their hobbies, but they knew that they would have to sacrifice something to do that. So, and just sorry, but just also to put it into perspective, it's interesting about the individual action, but we have to watch out not to think that individual action is enough for collective problem. It's collective action. So yes, I can use the stairs, I can use less the car, I can use, but if I do that, it's the same thing as I go to the sea, I grab a glass, a cup, I take out the water and I throw it on the land. Say, okay, I'm helping reduce the sea level rise. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. It has to be coordinated action. So more than doing individual actions, that it has its merit by itself, because as I said, one person can influence a lot of people, of course. It's doing collectively, is organizing and action.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're walking barefoot.
No, no, it's also nice. This is my own way of fighting the system, bringing into the scientists and also trying to like visually showcase what is really happening, I guess. But I agree, this is not enough, and like you really have to really push for the action. Um, but I'm a real example of perhaps I could tell my story that I'm from post-Soviet country, and we are actually systematically taught to be scared of uh, voicing our opinion. So
Yes.
we are severely punished. Therefore, for me, this way of doing like more playing within the system rules is kind of my way of fighting, because I have seen many examples, and I have also in my country recent accidents happened, and how they severely punished people. That's actually, and also my parents say me like, be quiet.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what
yes.
they're taught from the childhood. So I guess this is my upbringing, and whoever is from Central Asian or Asian or post Soviet countries, except closer to the Europe, I especially the Ukraine, the transition zone where democracy and the
Mm.
autocracy are fighting in between. I guess that's really interesting, because why? Okay, a bit of a politics, perhaps. Why Ukraine? I also voice it out a lot. Why Ukraine? Russia is fighting for Ukraine so much is because we share all the history. My dad served in Ukraine. We all have our relatives, or we are mixed, and therefore it's a breeze of democracy coming into the all post-Soviet countries. And therefore, it's so essential to Russia. Like, no, it's ideologically essential, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, we have to follow up with actions and voice it louder. But yeah,
Yeah, and it's interesting you saying that, because in Brazil, the dictatorship that we had there, there's this famous music from Caetano Veloso, and there's like the transition is "Shut Up," so but he makes like uh, because "Shut Up," "Cale-se," and in Portuguese also means does this cup that the kings used, like those fancy cups. The word can mean two things. So he says, like, take away this shut up from me. And it was a critic from, so we're not, we're, look, I was born in 87, and the dictatorship ended in 87, 88. But my family lived through the dictatorship over there. So one thing that I remember people saying it is this silence, that you weren't able to talk. This oppressing silence that you have to watch out every word. You have to watch out everything you said. That's why I say Rosa Luxemburg.
welcome,
Sometimes just
welcome to
saying
my
something.
world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I completely understand. And one thing that going back to Paulo Freire, as I said, using Paulo Freire, I make a joke that the only thing that is neutral is soap. The rest all have a position. Like it's the ones that say that doesn't have a position usually is in favor of the dominant ideology. Usually, when people say, "No, I don't have ideology," probably that person is aligned to the dominant ideology, because once it starts to change, that person starts to complain. So basically, you have to find the best way to fight it. As I said, it can be a very small action that turns into a big thing, and not all actions has to be noticeable to the people. So it means that you just need to do something, and that's the thing. Like, it's not bad being silent. I think what is bad, it's being silent all the time. Knowing when to be silent is also strategy as well.
As a scientist who is working in environmental sciences, so what skills are essential to develop for PhDs in their journey?
The main advice that I would say for PhDs starting their journey is know exactly what you want to research to. Because if you enter in an area that you say, okay, anything that's proposed to me, I will accept, you will work 3 times, 4 times more than necessary to do your PhD. So know exactly what you want to do. When I know exactly, I don't say like, I already know the data, no, because the PhD is a learning process. So what I mean is, for example, I want to study about wildfires and their effects on soil properties in this place. I will research that. So that way we will limit, because when we enter PhD, we want to learn everything. We want to do everything. We want to say it's a marvelous world, and then we say, well, you can see a freshman when they start the PhD, you can see straight on their face. They are happy, they are researching it. And on the last year, they are like, oh my God, I won't be able to have time. I'm having depression, anxiety. Yeah, so like focus on one thing, do that very well. And second thing is develop management skills, like how to manage data, how to manage articles that you read. There's a great methodology called Zeta-Kalsten methodology. It's from a professor, like how to write, how to extract articles from like advice, sorry, like how do you extract ideas from articles that you read so you can recollect later on and remember, oh yeah, I stored this idea on this paper. It was like, develop these types of skills. Try to develop how to manage your time, how to manage your work and the progression of your work, and try to focus. That's what I would say to someone who's starting their PhD.
Mhm. I also want to note to the listeners that yes, we had very interesting discussion today, and as well, perhaps we talked more about the social perspectives, or more about the concept than the technicality. But I would say that as long as you have a right concept, right ideology, or right research direction, then the technology follows. You will find a technology, right?
Yes.
So I guess this is also why this episode is quite essential. And
Yeah.
thank you very much for sharing all your perspectives, and also all the books and research would be provided in the description as well. If anyone wants to reach out to you, how they could reach out to you?
They can reach out to me by LinkedIn. I have my profile on LinkedIn over there. And I don't have social media. I just have LinkedIn. Then people can reach out. And thank you very much for the conversation. Thank you very much. It was very good.
Much, and also success in Chile. Very
Yeah, thank you very much.